So a year ago, almost a year ago, we were all in Bali, and the $20 billion was announced, $20 billion deal was announced between President Biden and President Jokowi. Rachmat, perhaps you could start by giving us a bit of an update on where we are. Clearly, we have had some bumps. The investment plan was delayed from the middle of the month. Where are we now?
Basically, I think there is this maybe notion that by 16th of August, we'll have this silver bullet that will solve all the problems in the world, which is not. That is not the intention. So by 16th of August, the JETP Secretariat has submitted a plan, a roadmap, if you will, whereby basically it's kind of compiling and editing the work of 4 working groups in JETP, which is first the technical working group, second is basically financing working group, the third one is policy working group, and the last one is the just transition working group. And as you know, it's led by, the work is led by international organization. For example, let me focus on the technical working group for a little bit, right? Because this is actually, this is where the most complex work is being done, which is, it's led by International Energy Agency that tried to optimize in terms of energy availability as well as the emission for Indonesia. And it has been quite challenging task, right? Obviously, because 17,500 islands, demand center is in Java, industrialization happened in Eastern Indonesia, and the team has done, I think, a tremendous job trying to basically engage on this process and come up with a product, basically a roadmap, if you will, to provide this much power. Typically, what kind of technology need to be deployed? Obviously, when they design the roadmap, basically it's done on a desktop, and it kind of forego maybe 3 main constraints. One, we assume policy is favorable, which is okay. Second thing is, we assume financing is available, that is suitable with that projects. And the third one, we assume this is happening without real life friction, land acquisitions and whatnot, right? So of course, 16th of August, government of Indonesia received this work, among with other work from policy and technical working group and just transition. And we have to review, and we have to see whether this actually can be done in the real world situation. So I think that's what we've been doing right now. The IPG is also reviewing and see whether there's something we can improve. Indonesian government is also working right now, and of course it takes a little bit of time to come back. But let me reiterate that the JETP Secretariat and everyone that is involved has done, I would say, breakthrough work. First time that people actually can do this type of collaboration, and of course using Indonesia as a platform.
Fabby, you do a lot of, we went from the sort of top-down approach, right? Setting the 20 billion, then making it happen, turning that into reality. A lot of the work that you do is bottom-up. I wondered, when you looked at the investment plan, what did you make of the data issues, and in particular of perhaps where we saw the greatest surprise, which is in captive coal?
There's a number of challenge that we are facing when we develop this investment plan. First, it's data. And what is actually missing from the previous target is not complete information on the captive coal. And we know that in the last 3 years, as Indonesia pushed forward for the downstreaming policy, and it's part of government big development programs, that there's a number of interest in processing the ore industries, and it's going on. I mean, in the last 3 years, we see that there is a number of new projects and application for building smelter, as well as the energy to power that smelter. So that was the missing data from the informations that being used as a reference for JETP target that was discussed in 2022, right? Because that data, I think, back in 2020, and in the last 3 years, the application for this captive coal has captive powers. It's not only coal, but also other type of plants.
We should just clarify for those who aren't steeped in the JETP that captive coal is coal plants that essentially serve an industrial client and not the grid.
Not connected
Yeah.
to the
So that's one. And because when this scenario is being developed, the questions about how many coal plants that need to be retired, because there's a two target of JETP, right? Emission peak, 290 million ton, and 34% of renewable energy mix. So from power system perspective, we have to balance meeting this. So it also requires, from our assessment, is that some of the coal capacities on grid right now need to be retired. And the question is how big that, of the capacity that needs to be retired, because we have to consider the future economic growth as well as electricity demand growth, as well as potential energy demand from increase of welfare of Indonesia. So it has to be very, very careful when we make such plan. So having kind of a balance and optimal pathways is not easy. Also, we understand that our utility PLN, we have to consider as well the impact, the financial impact of this energy transition to our utility, because they the one that serve 85% of electricity in the country. So there is a number of consideration in making this planning, and that makes having the optimum pathways is kind of challenging from our side.
One of the biggest challenges is the coal phase out. So not only encouraging Indonesia to build green energy, not only encouraging the infrastructure, but also stopping people from doing something. David, you're involved, or the Asian Development Bank is involved in the most advanced of the phase-out deals, which is Cirebon. Can you explain to us a little bit how that works and how it's going, and to what extent you feel that it is in the end replicable?
So yeah, we're working on one of the first, or the first accelerated coal retirement transactions in Indonesia with the Cirebon 1 plant. And effectively, this is an independent power producer, an IPP plant. And we're doing actually, in a way, a pretty common financial transaction, which is a refinancing and a releveraging. So this is a plant that's operated for about 10 years. They've paid off a bunch of their debt, and they have a fair amount of equity wrapped up in this plant and only a small amount of debt. We're looking to re-leverage that again back to about a 25-75 split. This will allow us to lower the cost of capital. But instead of the sponsors, the owners of this plant, taking that capital, they're going to put that towards retiring that plant early. This is, I think, an exciting approach, because there's been a lot of moving parts. Releveraging of an asset is not a new concept, but it's not possible in virtually all cases to relever coal assets anymore. The financial community has said, no, we don't want to be part of these transactions, but we can relever that plant, get that financial arbitrage, because we're shortening the life of the plant. So this isn't magic. This is numbers that all of you in the financial community are familiar with. But it does come with some challenges, and I love that word, friction. You know, that's really helpful, because
understated, but yes.
Yes, you know, we are, and Fabby mentioned that as well. We are removing capacity from the power system. This opens up new opportunity for clean energy. So I think this is a compelling time in history where renewables and clean energy are coming down in cost, becoming cheaper than coal. I think this is an opportunity to support the industrial development that Pak Luhut talked about earlier. So I think this is a real opportunity for Indonesia, but we can't forget about energy security and cost of energy and socioeconomic development. These all have to tie together. And, it's great to see this leadership in Indonesia.
There's a lot of juggling that is going on, a very complicated balancing act. So, Pak Rachmat, I wondered if, we talk a lot about the financing, and again, we heard Pak Luhut talk about the financing and the fact that perhaps we've seen the 20 billion on paper, we haven't seen it yet in reality. There is also a lot that Indonesia itself can do from a policy perspective. From where you sit, what is currently the priority? And of course, bearing in mind that we're heading into the end of this current presidential term.
Yeah, so maybe to think about it, the lowest hanging fruits that we can do quickly is, one, there are some policies that we know that we can do that basically will enable more green power investments. I think there's a lot of talk about local content requirements, also because that basically, one, because the problem is there is not enough industry in Indonesia to support it. So I think this week we have issued an alignment of the roadmap for solar panel. So now the local content that used to be 60%, right now until end of 2024, it become 40%. Why? Because we know that with this level, we have the industry already ready. And by 2025, we already have the industry that can handle the 60% local content. So this, I think, will speed up a lot of investments in solar, for example. There are another issue that we are currently working on and hopefully will be resolved relatively quickly, which is how can this local content requirement with the development financing agencies policies. And I think there is a solution for that. We're going to work on that. Hopefully we can announce it very soon. The other thing that we can do relatively quickly, and we are also pushing very hard, is not only on the supply of electricity part, but on the demand side. We know that today in Java-Bali system, we have excess capacity. And David's work is trying to reduce that excess capacity as well. But one other way is to increase the demand of electricity, hopefully with this usage will also reduce emission in different ways. For example, on electrification of transport, which is the second largest emission and will, of course, push the demand for green electrons moving forward. So the government of Indonesia is pushing this very, very hard on electrification of transportation. We give a lot of incentive, and I think more impact we will see by the end of this year and next year.
Thank you. Fabby, I wondered from your perspective and the analysis side, what would you like to see as the priority from the government? What would you like to see? Where would you like to see action? Where do you think that there is policy change that can be a multiplier, that can be a catalyst?
I think there's a couple of bottlenecks that we see that could hinder the implementation further, right? Pak Rachmat has mentioned local content regulation, but I think with the regulation that already issued, the new regulation that issued, I think 2 days ago, I think we seen that local content regulation temporarily solved, and I think they're more currently there are a number of investors are building solar panel manufacturing, including supply chains in Indonesia. We will see that happens. It's happening right now. But there's two kind of regulation that we need to further address, and I think it's very political. First is that domestic market obligation price cap for coal. Right now, the coal price for utilities is capped at $70 per ton, and I think this kind of incentivize to keep running the coal plants, right? Because even though renewable become getting cheaper and cheaper, but with this kind of policies, it makes coal even cheaper, right? So we have to get rid of this policy, but it's not easy. It's not easy, right? It requires a lot of effort, and including working together with the parliament, for instance. It's not just executive. President want to get rid of these regulations, of this policy, right? So that what we think that maybe it won't happen this year or next year because the election coming, but the next administration and the next parliament that have to resolve this. The second issue, I think, in regard to the electricity tariff, which also quite sensitive issue in Indonesia context. And that's one of the obstacles why renewable uptake so far very low. Indonesia is one of the, I think, have the cheapest electricity in Southeast Asia, and electricity price is heavily regulated. And that makes utilities doesn't want to purchase any renewables that higher than the average cost of their production cost. Right? So this becomes issue when we see some renewable energy like a solar is getting cheaper, but there are still a number of renewable that still cannot compete with coal. Geothermal, for instance, large hydro, that the price is still up. So we have to address this electricity tariff to allow utility to have more room, and also they have more capital to invest in renewable energy project. Because as I mentioned earlier, that this energy transition require a massive capital spending on clean energy infrastructure. That capital, our utility currently, PLN, doesn't have much. So look at the scale of financings, which we think is around $20 billion annual investment from now until 2030.
Annual investment, not the total.
Yeah, annual investments, right? So because the total investment until 2030 for the JETP, a little bit close to $100 billion, right? So we see that, we can ask for private sector, but again, the utility is the anchor of this investment. So maybe 60%, or because this also include investment in transmission, should come from utility, maybe 60% of it, right? So current financial situation, I mean, the bottom line of our utility PLN right now is very far from that amount, I think. So reforming electricity tariff and give utilities is moderate, I can say, rate of return could help in rapid investment in clean energy in Indonesia.
I'm glad you brought up the money question, because David, I was keen to ask you that. I mean, that was the whole point of the JETP, was that we were supposed to crowd in private finance. That was, I think, probably the biggest test of blended finance. Can it really work? In your work in Cirebon, you've obviously found that perhaps isn't as easy always in practice as it is in theory. What is stopping private capital from coming in at this point in time, and what can we do to tackle that?
So I think on the energy transition, renewables are easy. You know, everybody wants to invest. I think it's a growth market. It's a clean, everybody's happy. Addressing some of the more stickier points, whether it's industrial investments or investing in coal phase out, it has the word coal in it, or it has the word fossil in it. I think that we have to be very pragmatic in and deepen our understanding to find ways to invest in stopping doing what we don't want to do anymore. And I think this has been a challenge for some institutions. They say, I can't invest in coal phase out because this will put carbon on my books. I think that's a really simplistic answer, but there are those financial institutions who are looking beyond that, saying, okay, look, I have to explain myself. I'm investing this to retire it early, but I'm willing to do this because we need to do it. And I think it's exciting to see, you know, an opportunity like Cirebon, where, for instance, we are engaging with the utility. The utility has to take some level of risk to remove this plant from their grid. That is a bit of a risk, but if PLN and many other utilities in the region, if they don't start moving away from coal, they're going to struggle with raising capital as well. We're seeing that with companies that can't raise capital for new plants. That's becoming restricted. Refinancing or selling plants, we're seeing in the market across Asia, owners of these plants can't even get rid of them, or they have to get rid of them at a huge discount. So too will utilities struggle to raise the capital for all their investments if they don't start that transition towards clean energy. So I see, the leadership that Indonesia is doing, the leadership of PLN is putting them in a great position for the future, especially to get that needed capital.
Okay, Pak Rachmat, what does it look like from your point of view? You mentioned the IPG, so for those not familiar with the jargon, the countries that are working with Indonesia on the JETP, what does the financing part look like from the, let's say, the national level? Because we do know that a lot of that money is allocated, and as I think you've all mentioned, it's very easy to invest in renewables, far harder to provide grant financing and other money.
Yeah. I think, unfortunately, not unfortunately, this is a very difficult problem. We are trying to figure it out, and we have our own boundary conditions, you will. Indonesia is still a developing country, limited fiscal capacity. We have other priorities like human development and whatnot, right? Not only on the energy transition. That being said, I think we gotta be more creative. We gotta be more open to open all the optionalities. I don't think we can afford to be dogmatic about this. For example, no fossil at all, or no coal, or no carbon capture. Like we have to be open with all the potential technologies that we can use. But the goal is very clear. We need to reduce the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. What is the process? Maybe different countries will need to play with different conditions with what they have. So I think and hopefully the financing community can see that and maybe can help David as an example to support him.
David has $500 million to play with, so I'm not sure he's going to be able to solve all your problems. But hopefully. Just as we come to an end, a couple of important things to raise. You mentioned energy security earlier. Fabby, can we balance that? Is it possible to build this plane while it is flying?
Yeah, it is possible. I mean, I think technically it is possible. There is a number of challenges, and therefore we need to ramping up effort also. It's not only ramping up renewable energy deployment, but ramping up reform. I think that is needed to make that renewable energy deployment at a fast rate. It could happen. Just to give you an example, right? Right now under JETP, we talk about building almost 40 gigawatt of renewable from now until 2030. And it's in average, we have to build between 8 to 10 times that average of renewable energy capacity has been built so far. So you can see that it's challenging, even from supply chain point of view, but also from a procurement point of view, and the ability to secure everything, I mean, to make that project bankable. So that's an enormous challenge. And I think at the end, we also need proper financial instrument. I always say that, to make this to answer energy securities and affordabilities in Indonesia context, that we need proper financing. And I think in JETP, our conclusion is that, we need concessional finance, low interest concessional finance. The question is, who's going to provide that? We need almost $100 billion, which that type of financing, that's, I think, that we need to resolve to make that JETP can be successfully implemented.